Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And well, summer is in full swing, I would say. Here in Belgium we're gonna get 38 degrees Celsius next week, only for a day, so it should be doable, but it's still gonna be pretty interesting to see those kinds of temperatures here. And with a heat wave here in Europe, basically don't expect too much activity in the game. That's definitely going to be part of the problem. Same thing with the development news, right? I don't expect too much news to come out of CCP at the moment, with in all likeliness a lot of their people also taking vacations in order to enjoy the summer weather. Of course, I can't completely ignore it, although I am mostly trying to do so. There is a lot of drama happening in EVE around the Imperium, Goon Swarm, that type of stuff. You know, you can just take a look at the subreddit if you want to read up on that for yourself. I myself, basically, I don't know any of these people, I don't know any of these situations, so I'm really not the right person to talk about it. I would just say that I would always try to keep things in game, right? Don't try to escalate without a very good reason beyond in-game stuff. And it's also sort of the responsibility of people that become somewhat EVE famous, you could say, to also keep things in-game, to not go out there and do crazy stuff or expose themselves to the potential wrath of the crowd, which is basically what's potentially happening here as well. Maybe for a good reason, I absolutely don't know. Completely in the dark on all of that. But yeah, lots of drama happening, and if that's your cup of tea, of course, then I think you will have had a good week there as well. But let's take a quick look at the new Eden store. Let's keep things in game as much as possible. Here is the new Eden store, and we've got Chainbreaker Kumak skins that seem to be hot at the moment. I think they look pretty good, although I prefer some darker versions myself. I would go for some of the other Minmatar skins that were new just last week. But this is now front and center. Obviously, we do have the Minmatar Liberation celebrations that just happened, so it's kind of normal that Minmatar skins get to be front and center, but on the services front we don't have any sales or anything like that to report. So let's get to it then and get started with those pilot services that's coming in at 240. And we will start with Plex. In fact, I saw a post about Plex on the subreddit as well, where sell prices went up to 4 million ISK, so that's like times 500 for 30 days game time, 2 billion, something like that, in order to that's quite a bit of grinding, of course, if you want to keep going. You can see we're down just a touch from that 4 million, but we're really not far off anymore. So just below 4 million for the sellers, 3.8 million for the first buyer in JITA as well, and I don't expect to see too much of a difference when it comes to the player-owned trade hubs. Nope, just competing with JITA itself, but the prices keep bouncing from JITA to the trade hub, back to JITA, etc. So this is really the price, and pretty expensive, of course. If we look on the chart here, we just broke through that 375 mark for the average prices quite easily, and you can see that the high points start to play or to touch that 4 million range as well. And yeah, potentially this could get even worse, although again I am personally looking at these lower volumes as well, so this is part of the new reality. Of course, Plex are far more expensive, well, or more expensive now in real life than they were a couple of months ago. As a result, in-game prices have gone up substantially, but at the moment we also still have the summer slump, which can go into either direction. It can mean that there's also less supply, as people don't feel the need to buy Plex from CCP and put them on the market to get ISK, since there's not that much to do. On the other hand, should also be less demand for this as well, so it's really potentially always a double-edged sword. It's not easy to say what the net impact is going to be from a summertime slump or anything like that in EVE Online. And of course, at the moment things are far more complex than that. In fact, one of you guys also asked me to make a video about my thoughts on the current state of EVE. I'm thinking about it, I'm not really sure. Basically, personally, in a nutshell, I'm still waiting to see what'll come later down this year from what they've presented at FanFest, if that heraldry is going to be something like that I want to invest some time into, and of course the faction warfare changes. How accessible will it be? How cool will it be? Is that potentially something that I want to jump into? And then I'm also still keeping an open mind for next year, because then it's going to be 20 years of EVE Online, and so I'm kind of hoping that CCP has some stuff cooked up already, preparing for that anniversary for those 20 years, and then we'll of course see at that point. Honestly, that's maybe when I could say how I feel about EVE Online after those 20 years. So at the moment, yeah, I'm still in flux, still waiting to see what happens next. But let's also take a look at the multiple pilot train certificates, obviously following suit, but you know, compared to the 2 billion that you need for 500 plex, this is actually relatively cheap. 1.7 billion for the sellers, 1.6 billion for the buyers. You can see though that those volumes have started to drop as well, that the upwards pressure is here, and so I do think that these train certificates are up for a catch-up on plex. And you have to keep in mind as well that there is basically less utility in these training certificates. It is to train a second or third character on your active account, and so usually you know, for a lot of players, I think just keeping your main up and running is the most important bit. And then on top of that, for Plex, you can also exchange that for other things, buy skins with it. So there's far more utility in Plex that is undoubtedly going to come out a bit of a premium as well, as this basically allows you to get your and keep your account in Omega to buy lots of stuff. The multiple pilot train certificate does not do that, right? It doesn't allow you to just use only that and that's it on an account. No, it's always for a second character on an account. It is different and probably a little bit less valuable to most players than Plex itself. For the skill extractors, obviously that pressure is also mounting here. You can see that the upwards momentum in the last week, although we started off at a spike and the daily averages are basically flattening out just below 450 million, the trend is still clearly up at the moment. We're talking 446, so just below 450 million for the sellers, 435 million for the buyers. Very expensive one-year high points, but yeah, that's obviously going to be the trend in most of these pilot services. Again, you can clearly see that all of this took off March, April, when CCP increased the prices for all of these things. Then we've got the injectors. Here are the large scale injectors that, yeah, you might look at the 5-day moving average and things like that and see a little bit of a plateau, but what you should notice here is those daily averages and those max prices that have just gone above 800 million ISK. So there is still upwards momentum, despite the fact that I would say a very important barrier is being breached here. 800 million ISK for a large scale injector. We're at 815 for the sellers, getting to 820 quite quickly, and 770 for the buyers. So there is this little bit of hesitation for the market to just straight punch through 800 million. Buyers are a little bit more wary before they're willing to pull the trigger on that, but sellers have just pushed right through that, and it could be very difficult for buyers to maintain this larger margin. I would say all of a sudden you can see that those buyers are trying to stay very close to the range that we've had all month, but those max prices have shot up, and so that increased pressure on those buyers is undoubtedly mounting at the moment. Small scale injectors not able to buck the trend, and in fact a little bit more visibly showing that pressure from Plex and that increased price. 1-year high point right now on the daily averages and the 5-day moving average and the 20-day moving average. So obviously here lower volumes on these higher prices, but you can see that upwards momentum for what's happening. 163 million to 150 million all of a sudden, right? A little bit less of a margin between sellers and buyers here, because there is a bit more, I would say, quick response in this market. It's a smaller item, it's got a smaller price range, and as a result it can react a little bit more quickly than the large scale injectors to what's happening in the market. And then of course we've got our daily alpha injectors. You could say are one exception to the rule of everything being super expensive, as this one is still hovering around 45 million, which is pretty much the average for the year. But of course my theory, you guys probably know noticed by now is that CCP does actively intervene in the daily alpha injector, keeping a very close eye on that one, because it is probably a very good hook for a lot of alpha players. And someone mentioned this as well in one of the previous EVE talks, it's also something to do for alt characters, for more veteran players as well, and they want to, in all likeliness, keep this at a doable treadmill. So at the moment it's 45 million, and you can clearly see here when we broke 50, and here after we touched 50 twice, that CCP comes in with a sale, pushes the price below 40, and it looks like this is CCP intervention to keep things in check and to keep that daily alpha injector treadmill on something that is doable on a daily basis. If we would get just straight upwards pressure without these sales, I would not be surprised that you would have to go for 65 million at this point for a daily alpha injector, which is a far more daunting task than something that's less than 50. So I would say that's what's at play here, and I fully personally expect CCP to keep a close eye on that and to keep this in check, which does mean that you can potentially speculate on this one with sales and high points, and you know exactly when potentially to sell your daily alpha injectors. But it's not as good for potential trading as plex, for instance, that have gone up, of course, to crazy 4 million prices compared to a year ago. Let's say it feels very crazy, and this is of course a nice chart to trade on. If you bought here and you can sell now, you're looking at some pretty massive profits. And then finally we've got the hypercores that are starting to fluctuate just above the 400,000 price range for and 3,000 for the sellers, and 396,000 for the buyers. So that's a super narrow margin here, and this to me is that same read or that same feeling that the market has here of basically hesitation, because we are talking about lots of potential forces that are pushing on, potentially seeing inflation, seeing deflation, seeing less activity. That could mean less supply but also less demand. And how is all of this going to play out? Well, over the course of the last month or so, the market here has been flatter than most of all of them. They are obviously showing very low volumes, but basically stuck at pretty high prices, but not continuing to endlessly go upwards, which is still the trajectory for plex. But in my opinion, that could of course stop at one point as well. What may be actually driving this a little bit is the Fraternity Brave war that brings back some players, or good chunks of players actually, to take part in potential action in nullsec. I think that would be my theory why plex has continued to go up while the hypercores show hesitation on services and everything continuing to go up, continuing to be in an inflationary setting. So let's take a look at the minerals next. 1240. There we go. As always, we start with titanium, and you can see, well, for the first time, a couple of indications that we try to go back up. Average price is back above 3.8. It's still very, very timid, but at least we are away from the bottom, and sellers are now coming in at, gotta go for G down this one, 380, 382 for the next one, and then 364 for the buyer. So we're still well above 3.5 ISK, which I think is pretty good, and selling close to 380, I think, compared to everything we've seen in the last couple of months, is still not a bad price, despite the fact that, of course, the full 1 year chart looks pretty bad. We have to remember that the Siege Green update has basically not done too much for Tech 1 manufacturing. It's focused on the large ships, and mostly the levers that CCP has been playing with have been like PI and some of the new materials and things like that. So they're not mineral related, and for HiSec we've generally been quite oversupplied compared to the lower activity that we find ourselves in. So you get a little bit of support probably from slightly more usage if like nullsec is making more large ships, but other than that hasn't moved that much, and still we are close to 4 ISK, which I would say is still not that bad, considering that I think it's in a previous update somewhere that CCP did reduce the general need for titanium in the economy, in the industry processes. So overall, I would say that this is still an okay place to sell your titanium as well, if you're mining in HiSec. Then we've got pyrite showing the same thing, right? A slight uptick in the last couple of days, heading back for 10 ISK. 11.40 in fact for the sellers and 9.29 for the buyers. So still a little bit of margin and a little bit of back and forth between sellers and buyers here, you know, when it comes to where the action is. But the trend is up, which I would say is again very good news for those high-sec miners. And yeah, you're only getting 10 ISK when last year you could get almost 20 ISK for your pyrite. But still, considering the whole situation, I would still say that it's not that bad, and I would still basically, if I need ISK, I wouldn't hesitate to sell my titanium or pyrite. But maybe if you are playing the longer game, you could do like a mix, right? Sell half, keep half, or decide on something like that. And then finally we've got Mixelon that is not moving anywhere, but is still at 60 ISK, which is the same as it was at the start of the year. So that is of course still your focus if you're mining in high-sec. Try to find sources of Mixelon because you are getting a little bit more for that one. 60 for the sellers, 57 for the buyers, showing in my opinion that if there's one thing that the Siege Green update will have done, is it will have cemented a little bit more demand for those high-sec minerals into the general industry landscape at the moment, despite the fact that we are in all likelihood seeing very low activity in the game. And so it's made making larger ships more accessible. So Nelsig is probably working on that quite a lot, and that means that there is, despite the fact that there are fewer players and fewer activities, that does mean that there is a need for minerals, which is of course very good news for those that are mining in high-sec. Then we've got low-sec. Here is the Isogen chart, and yeah, today's max is still bugging out, so it's being quite annoying. And this is sort of what I was predicting as well, that would start happening when we reached that April bump, and then actually started to hesitate a little bit, is that when we reach prices that we haven't seen before, the market will hesitate a little bit because some players will find their Isogen reserves and say, ooh, that's a nice opportunity. Haven't seen that for many years, the ability to sell Isogen above 400 ISK, and that is going to put a little bit of sell pressure with bigger volumes all of a sudden that the market can't just absorb. And so we get this week. Clearly we are going back down on selling pressure. Sellers coming in still at 417, so they're still above 400 ISK. Buyers are at 407 as well, but you can clearly see that the average prices have taken a little bit of a dive here, and this is after breaking out quite substantially. So a big buy has pushed us up on that 450, which is probably at that max price. Some players said, all right, let's sell right now because that's a great price, and putting pressure back to the 400, but they're not overdoing it too much if I'm looking at the current sell and buy prices. So let's also take a quick look here at the volumes and head towards the 450 if I can. Yeah, there we go. So here is the competition coming in: 454, 70 million, 30 million, another 20 million. And then on the smaller volumes, they actually compete very quickly at the 450, 440, 430, 420, and then we're reaching our sweet. Another here, that's the biggest problem probably, another 44 million units coming in at 423, keeping the market in check a little bit. Another 20 million units down here. This is what I was talking about. It's still well above 400 ISK, so that the opportunity is there to sell at a really good price, but it's enough to spook the market a little bit. And in general, I would say also for low-sec, there is plenty of supply for what's needed, because Noxium is continuing the downward trend. It was a little bit of a surprise for me last week, but then this week, of course, we are expecting this trend to continue. This to me basically means that whatever is happening in low-sec is plenty for the current activity levels in EVE Online, and that, yeah, a little bit as expected, when we do reach low-sec minerals becoming in a state where it's active supply versus active demand, outward factors like how many players are playing the game at the moment will also play a major role in determining their price. And while stuff like titanium and pyrite is needed in absolutely massive quantities, and so once you want to make a couple freighters, couple carriers, you need massive amounts of them that can quite often help keep these prices in check. For stuff like Noxium and Isogen, it's way lower in the amounts that you need, and so just some regular activity can keep up with that very easily, which in my opinion is why Noxium has gone well below 1000 at 950 for the sellers and 910 for the buyers. And so this to me is one of the indications that, yeah, this is low activity. This is the summer slump that's happening at the moment. And well, the first one to really be a casualty of this is Noxium, and probably Isogen as well. That might actually have gone up substantially more if we'd seen more activity in EVE Online. And then we get the reverse, which honestly it's now starting to dawn on me that with everything that's happening in nullsec, this could be part of the problem. And you always, when things explode out into the public, they've usually been simmering for quite a while. We do have the Fraternity Brave situation, which is a nice in-game conflict. That's what we like, but that was probably, you know, in the run-up here, you could expect that there were probably some rumblings about all of that as well. And that could have driven some players that would usually bring a lot of Zydra into the market to be more careful, to maybe prepare for other activities and things like that. And then of course the largest group in the game having leadership problems. You never know how that turns out. I think if I read it correctly, that the Mitani just basically stepped down without like blowing up the alliance or anything like that. But you could do a lot of damage as a CEO of an alliance or a corporation on your way out in EVE Online. That's definitely the case. And so maybe all of this uncertainty will have helped to push these prices up substantially for Zydra and Megasite as well. Here for this week, well, we're still kind of expensive. I would say 50%, well 60% above the Noxium prices. So back at the most expensive minerals coming from nullsec, 1620, 1630 for most sellers, and 15 above 1500 for the buyers of Zydrine. And then Megasite may have seen that on the ticker as well, doing another climb, although it's a little bit of potentially a double top here, but well above 1500 ISK as well. 1650 for the sellers and almost 1600 for the buyers. So Megasite and Zydrine still very expensive, 1 year high points, despite the fact that, yeah, it is summertime, it is the summer slump. And so here might be a number of factors, including some of the rumblings that are happening in nullsec. I would say that it's also very likely that yeah, mining activity in nullsec is one of the big casualties of the lower activities in EVE Online at the moment, and so these prices have gone up quite substantially. And then finally we've got Morphite that is still slowly going down, and I would put that in the same bucket then as Noxium. It's still very expensive, of course. Single piece of Morphite, 40,000 for the sellers, 38,000 for the buyers. But my read on this is, why are we seeing some pressure on the price? Well, not because there's not enough supply. I think supplies are actually remaining quite constant, just like with Noxium. Apparently they're able to keep their supplies quite constant. But the lower activity is actually eating away at demand. And for Megasite and Zydrine, there we're probably seeing lower activity be one of those activities that mining in nullsec. So overall, yeah, still lots of pointers to me that indicate that the summer slump is here, and that it will take quite a bit of effort and probably some CCP announcement in order to try and keep the hype up a little bit, which they are going to do those live streams over the summer. But will that be enough? Well, I don't know. I'd actually need some new stuff to show up into the game, or to at least be announced with a concrete date, a little bit of information on what to do so you can prep for it. That would be what I would personally need in order to get my excitement levels higher than what they are now. EVE is in maintenance mode for me as well. Next up, we've got PI 2325. There we go. Let's take a look at these and see if the summer slump shows up here as well. Here are the broadcast nodes still holding on quite well, just below average, below 1.5 million. Buyers, look at that narrow margin, 1456 for the sellers, 1433 for the buyers, a super narrow margin. And this to me indicating that there is demand from bigger ships, and that's probably what's keeping this in check. Then we've got our construction blocks that climbed up above 9,000 discs. If you're looking for a slump, well, it's not here. 9.4 for the sellers, 8,600 for the buyers. Close to a one-year high point for the price of construction blocks. Pretty damn impressive chart to look at. Then we've got coolants, max prices climbing up to 10k again as well, which is actually really impressive, right? Just below 10,000 discs for the sellers, almost 9,000 discs for the buyers, and this is really impressive considering that I don't think it's the Siege Green update, but it's gonna be one of the updates before that, that coolants took a big nerf when the general need of water was massively decreased in the economy, just like with titanium basically. And for coolants to, under those circumstances, make it back to 10k, which is a historically normal price for coolants, is actually very, very impressive. Then we've got enriched uranium down a little bit on the chart, but still 10,000 for the sellers, 9.4 for the buyers. I would still say that that's a very good price. It is a little bit more complex to make than coolants, a little bit harder to find the right planets for that, but it's still that really good historical price of around 10k for a refined PI material. Integrity response drones slowly losing a little bit of ground on 2.5 million, but nothing too drastic. Just below 2.5 for the sellers, still above 2.4 million for the buyers. So the big winner for that Siege Green update, I would say, is cementing those gains. And to me, another show that, yeah, the Siege Green update here in May will have helped with the accessibility of production for larger ships. Now, not for individual players like myself, but for alliances and large groups, probably it makes a very, very big difference. And this is why, despite the summer slump showing up in quite a few of these goods, what we actually see is that advanced PI material is holding on quite well, and those high-sec minerals are holding on quite well as well. Then we've got mechanical parts, again losing a little bit of ground here as well. It can go fast, but still 10,700 for the sellers, 8,500 for the buyers. It's a big margin that has opened up here, but this is still a very, very nice price for something that you're making on barren planets. Then we've got our miniature electronics, had a spike last week I think, and it's coming down a little bit from that, but again it's just a refined material. 12,000 for the sellers, almost 12,000 for the buyers. Very impressive to see a early summer spike in PI. Clearly, again, not what I personally expected. Then we've got the nano factories holding on just below a million, which is not a great price, but looking at this one-year chart, this is again not bad. Just below a million for the sellers, just below 900,000 for the buyers. And I would again say that, yeah, there is stronger demand for PI thanks to the Siege Green update that is keeping these prices really very nice and high for a lot of the PI that we're covering here. Organic mortar applicators, kind of the same story, right? It's in May that we got the update, but eventually I think we chewed through the supply and then we managed to make our way above 800,000 discs. It's not great, but on the full one-year chart, we're doing okay, which is quite surprising for pretty much the start of the summer. 730,000 to 720,000, very narrow margin, showing that it's the demand that is showing up, and supplies, well, those in my opinion tend to always be quite plentiful for PI because it's one of the most passive activities in the game. Recursive computing modules, that was one of our exceptions, did dump down to 750,000, comes back up a little bit, almost 900k for the sellers and buyers above 800k as well. Robotics losing a little bit of ground, but again from a one-year high point above 75,000 discs, that's not bad. Kind of the same story as what we're probably seeing with some of the other minerals like isogen. We reached 75k right here, and then some sellers are ready with their robotics investments and are saying, all right, let's start to dump some of that to take some of these profits at a one-year high point. Always does make sense that you get to lose a little bit of ground right after that. Then we get our rocket fuels still at 11,000 disc on the chart, 11.3 for the sellers. sellers, 10.5 for the buyers. So very nice price. Self-harmonizing power cores, well above 2 million, still there. Yeah, 2.1 for the sellers, 1.9 million for the buyers. Very, very nice and impressive price over the last couple of months. Then we get the smart fab units, flat at 60k, so this one is not as popular, not that much demand in this one, but still 69,000 for the sellers, almost 70, which is quite okay. Sterile conduits, would love to see you be above 1 million, but it's 940,000 for the sellers and 800,000 for the buyers. Not all of them can, of course, be at those crazy good prices. Then our supercomputers not doing that well either, but still 70k for the sellers. That's again quite alright for a specialized material. Our synthetic oil losing a bit of ground, but 9,000 for the sellers on no demand whatsoever. I would still call this pretty impressive, right? Sellers are dominating this market quite massively, have been pushing the price back down, and yet sellers are holding on to 9,000 disk for synthetic oil. In GDA at least. Then we get synthetic synapses, 91,000. That's definitely a really good price, but of course that one and microcontrollers, bit of their own market because they're tied to implants, 90,000 almost here as well. And then we get a couple of over abundant ones like the water-cooled CPU, less than 5,000 disk. That's not too great. And the wetware mainframes, they're doing all right, well above 1.5, yeah, 1.7 million now for the sellers, almost 1.5 for the buyer. So while I was personally expecting a very difficult time for PI over the summer, at least the start of the summer has been great. I would say that we can continue to sell. I myself have been selling mechanical parts and whatever it is that I make and have for PI quite decently, and I would say we're still in a really good spot to be selling at the moment. Be careful that you don't spook the market too much, and I'm sure that some of you guys will have really big reserves out there. I would always be a little bit careful of that, especially at the moment, because we don't have a lot of extra demand, in my opinion, to weather the summer slump that we're probably going through at the moment. But it is still a great time to be selling with this market. So next up, we've got advanced moon materials coming in at 3110. And here the story is probably a little bit different. Now here we've got from the last couple of months basically a massive crash of the carbides and the metamaterials needed for production of mostly ships, I believe, but also quite a few other things. And the main reason that we're speculating is what happened there is that after that big focus with the mining changes on Morphite number 1, of course, that was going for 130,000, so that was always going to be mined first. That after that, it was really moon mining that took off in and around nullsec, and as a result, an oversupply of these goods happened as well. And then over the last couple of weeks, maybe we could see a little bit of bottom formation happen, and that was, of course, when we've got a deployment from the Imperium that was announced, when we got Brave and Fraternity having a big battle. Those could potentially cut down on that moon mining activity and thus form a bottom, but we can't forget the other side of the coin, which is of course that in general we are seeing quite low activity in the game. And so let's see where we are at this week. Here is crystalline carbonite for Galente, and basically we hovered back down at the 1 year low point, well below 100 disk. So all those that bought here up towards over 100 disk, thinking this was gonna be the bottom because of what was happening in nullsec, well, you're right back at zero. We are currently selling for 91 ISK and buyers are coming in at 87, 1 year low point. Now for the longer term, I would personally say this looks like a place where you could try to grab a bit of this below 90 ISK. I would say that could be a very good investment. But it will all then depend on what happens over the course of the summer, and it is possible that we're not at the bottom yet if things actually cool down in nullsec and we continue to get lower activity. then even lower prices are possible in my opinion. Then we've got Caldari, so here is titanium carbide that you know, really gave us a little bit of hope, you could say, that we were forming the bottom right here in June and in April, right, 100 disc and below 100 disc. That was clearly the bottom as we shot up to well above 150, but look at the ground that we are losing very quickly here, down to 122 for the sellers, 115 for the buyers, and I would say that we're probably gonna see a little bit more pressure. You can see here some data points that went close to 110 as well. Then for Minmatar, here is a Fernite carbide that's also hovering at that 1 year low point well below 100, 94 for the sellers, 91 for the buyers. Again, super low. And then we've got tungsten carbide for Amar that's just landing on 100 as well. It's not the 1 year low point, but clearly the lower end of the range, 112 to 96 for tungsten carbide. So here lots and lots of pressure and really low prices. Your choice to make, I would say buying a tiny little bit, just being ready for that for a trade would make sense, but make sure that you keep some powder dry because this could not be the end. Then for our meta materials, let's see if I can find Galente. Here is photonic meta materials, yep, continuing to go down as well and just broke through 7,500 disc. Not a 1 year low point just yet, but below 7.4 for the sellers and below 7,100 for the buyers. To me, kind of potentially that same story. Although this could not be the end of it, we're clearly at super low prices at the moment. Then for Caldari, titanium, no, not carbide, but the metamaterials is what I need, my mistake. Where the hell is the C? There we go, non-linear metamaterials. Still having that Caldari premium and actually holding on quite nicely. We are talking 13,000 for the sellers, 12,400 for the buyers. Bit of a surprise to me that we don't see more pressure here. So yeah, that's Caldari does have a little bit of a premium compared to everything else, if I'm not mistaken. Then for Minmatar, it's plasmonic metamaterials, doing a bit more of a wavy move with low points at 10,000 disc and then managing to make its way back to 15k. But look at that, sellers are already down to 13.7, buyers are at 10,600. So in my opinion, this can very quickly again go down to 10,000 ISK, especially if, well, this I'm going to say is probably due to Imperium Meta, which I believe use a Minmatar heavy assault cruiser as part of their fleet doctrines and is probably used quite often and maybe even lost, if I'm not mistaken. A couple of Munin fleets lost in the brawl between Fraternity and Brave, if I'm not mistaken. That happened there as well, which can clearly explain this price. But then the question again is, can this last? And looking at everything else, I think that we will go back down and test 10,000 ISK. Then we've got terahertz metamaterials for Minmatar, which is one of the reasons why I believe that we are back below 10,000 ISK on this one as well. 1 year low point, 9.6 for the sellers and just above 9,000 ISK for the buyers. So for the ship related stuff, or mostly ship related stuff, we are seeing pressure that is back on. Then we've got the other advanced move materials, which I think most of them did a bit of a bounce away from a bottom range, but then I would say bad news at the tail end here. For instance, for fermionic condensates, pressure is back and today's data point is already back below 45,000 ISK. Just above that for the sellers, 44 for the buyer. So actually able to stay away from that 40k bottom. But I would say pressure is probably going to be back. Ferrogel kind of confirming that 5-day moving average back below 20-day moving average. We're heading back for 20,000, 21 to 19.4 for the buyers. Buyers are just evaporating again. Fullerite, there's the pressure again as well. Look at those minimum prices right back down to 400 ISK. So all of the other buyers are gone. 538 to 433. Hypersynaptic fibers. Again, it's hardly visible, but we are crossing, and then the minimum prices heading back for 5k. Well, 5.6 to 5.2, so still a little bit better. Here, hesitating, but yeah, 2,500 ISK, that's clearly a bottom range as well. Phenolic composites, there's the pressure yet again. I think we can go over these a little bit more quickly. Those newer ones, so pressurized oxidizers and reinforced carbon fibers, are at 1 year low points yet again, 7.4 to 6.2. I would not invest too much in these, honestly. because I think that the market is still kind of discovering what these are all about and how to effectively bring them to the market, and we're just getting better at introducing reinforced carbon fibers and pressurized oxidizers into the game. So these would not be my gamble. I would prefer some of the more established goods there. 6,600 for the sellers, 6,400 for the buyers, and another close to 1 year low points. And then we've got our ceramic fibers. There's that pressure again. So yeah, overall for this week, I would say we are back on the negative train if low prices are a bad thing for you in advanced boom materials. But I think that yeah, it's the summer slump that is starting to show through here, and that while there are some buy opportunities, I would definitely slowly buy and be careful before jumping in on too big volumes. And then the impact on Take 2 ships next, that could be interesting. 39.25. Let's take a look at these and see what's happening. So Basilisk Cerberus, we all know that those bump back up a little bit, and I would say that that is that Caldari premium. It is shields, it is missiles, so they are very, very popular. And so you can see that the Basilisk made its way back to 180 million, but again, at the tail end here, pressure is on, and you look at those minimum prices heading back for 130. Sellers are at 140, the first one, 147 for most, and 130 million for the buyer. So that premium has opened up, the pressure is here. The question is, will it be strong enough to push those daily average prices towards 130 million and buyers even below that? I personally think that that will happen. Then we've got the Cerberus, a little bit of a bump right at the tail end. Big volumes in the last couple of days. My read on that, Nullsec coming in to buy a Cerberus fleet or two, 187 to 143, but you know, that's the 2-day exception on the pressure that was clearly mounting, bringing us back to 150. So that will happen in some of the more popular ships as well, which can potentially be a place to look for trades as well. But the timings there, of course, are very difficult if you don't have the information on what's happening in Nullsec. Then we've got the Curse, 1 year low point right now, selling 123, buyers at below 110 at 107. You know, a Curse is actually a pretty damn good ship. It's a recon ship. It has drones, I believe. Yep, there we go. It has a drone bonus, 150 capacity, 50. So it's only 5 medium drones, but it is quite good. Cannot be detected by directional scanners. It's definitely an interesting one, and in fact, again, I'm going to write that down so that I can buy a couple. If you're looking for potentially an adventure in wormhole space and maybe doing something off the radar in the faction warfare update that could be coming in, something like a Curse, in my opinion, makes sense, especially if, like me, you love the drone meta in PvP. So that's something I'll look into, and I think I will buy 1 or 2 Curses this week. Then we've got the Damnation getting close to a 1 year low point yet again, to 68 to 250 million. Kind of the same story. It is actually a command ship, so it is very powerful and very useful. You're buying one on the very cheap if you want to. This does seem like the time to do so. Then we've got the Deacon that's holding on a little bit better. Can I expect it, right? Logistic frigates, eventually some groups will find those useful, but those minimum prices have gone below 15. Is that correct? Yeah, 14 million for the buyers. So I'd say you could try a buy order. There is a bit of pressure to be seen, not enough. It's going to be difficult to grab one below 15 million, but it might just be possible. Then we've got the Eagle, right? Definitely meta bump right here, up to 200 million, losing a lot of ground again, and close to 100 million, so close to 1 year low point, 138 to 117. Not the lowest point, so maybe you can have a little bit more patience. But if you want a couple of Eagles because that's what your alliance flies, then maybe buying now could make sense. Then we've got the EOS command ship, again also slumping back down. I bought on this slump and I think you could go for it again, 264 to 255. I think it's still like a couple million more expensive than what I bought it at, but it's definitely way down in price again over the last couple of weeks. So we're back in the yeah, buy cheap if you want to for Take 2. Here is the Aries 38 to 32. Then we get the Flycatcher. An exception, Caldari, again, they are super popular, going back above 50 million. So if you bought a month ago here for 40 and below, you're selling at 51. That is that trade, and that's gonna be the nullsec trade again. Probably Flycatchers for the interdictors that are being flown, very popular. You can also see the volumes are quite impressive on a couple of occasions. So these are big buys happening by bigger groups in order to support their fleets, and those are trade opportunities. I mean, 10 million on a 40 million buy is definitely not bad. Then we get the Guardian slumping back down again as well. Buyers probably close to the 1-year low point, 129 to 113. Yeah, to me, this is another one where jump in, be as low as possible for that buy order for it to trigger. You can see on the minimum prices that you can buy very close to the 1-year low point, and it's like a medium longer term. Eventually a logistics cruiser makes a lot of sense to be bought in bigger volumes, and then we should see higher prices. But yeah, in general, I would give the same warning as with the advanced boom materials. I would mostly buy what you're planning to use, which is what I've been doing myself, looking at all of this, and then your investments, do so slowly because we don't know if this is over. Then the Heretic had a little bit of a bump back up to 40 million, and pressure is starting to build, but it's not that great just yet, so definitely not in the buy territory. And then the Hound had a bit of a volume bump here as well, which is to be expected. I did mention that, I believe, a couple of EVE talks ago. If you are looking for the active trading right now in Take 2, which is very, very difficult, I would look at stealth bombers, I would look at smaller ships. And so just a couple of weeks ago, you could have easily bought these below 15 million. Now you're selling them at 20 million. So there is your trade, which again, with a couple of Hounds, is definitely doable. With 10-20 of them, you're gonna completely crush the market. That's gonna be too much of it. So it is slow. It is in low volumes that I believe you've got to do the active trading, but in stuff like stealth bombers, you definitely have an opportunity, because those will get purchased by not just the active groups, but also third parties, of course. Who doesn't love or dream of making a nice bombing run on an enemy fleet with a couple dozen Hounds? That, of course, is enough to start buying these, and thus you get these potential trades. For the Triglavian stuff, Ichthyorsa are making its way back to 500 million on average, 520 to 450, so you can still try to buy one on the cheap if you absolutely want to have a Triglavian ship available for yourself. This is pretty much the cheapest the Ichthyorsa has been all year, still pretty good. And then we've got the Ishtar, which is kind of your warning that all of this might not be over, because at the moment, and just a couple days, the average is at a 1-year low point. We haven't seen those minimum prices below this at all over the last year. 130 for the sellers, 113 million for the buyers of the Ishtar. Yeah, especially if you want to use them, you know that this is my go-to exploration ship for the all-in-one package. You get all the drones to handle all the challenges in high sec. You can easily justify an analyzer for a mid slot, and you can even just like put plenty of high slots where you can put utility, couple of weapons, whatever you want. This will do anything and everything exploration wise in high sec very, very easily. So for me, this is a no-brain buy if you're an explorer, right? I've got 1 or 2 in all of my bases of operations. It's just that good. It's so versatile. It's really great. So you're buying them super, super cheaply at the moment. If I didn't have so many of them already, I would probably look at grabbing a couple extra. Then we've got the Kirin, which is again the trade that I was talking about. Small logistics frigate, 20 million, definitely doable in price range as well for someone that wants to do some of those quick trades. You need a little bit more patience, but I would say that not that long ago, a couple months ago, you could have easily bought this below 20 million. They're selling at 24. It's not a great trade, but you are looking at a bit of a sell bump in the last couple of days on this one. Manticore, same story, right? Stealth bombers, so you could have bought these close to 15 million, let's say 16, 17 just a couple of days ago, and here you had that sell opportunity up to 27 million. We're coming back down from that, but it's still 21 for the sellers, 19 for the buyers. This moves more quickly because it is smaller, and because of course if you then make a mistake with your stealth bomber fleet, you're in a lot of trouble and you'll need to replace all of them. The Nemesis also slowly climbing up, so you could have bought these for 12.5, 13 million. You're selling them at 16.5 at the moment, which is, you know, not the best price for the week, but still. I would say again, this does show that those stealth bombers, logistics frigates are interesting ones to pick up at the 1 year low points, and then eventually someone is going to buy those and you'll get your sell opportunity. Don't expect a 50% profit margin or anything like that at the moment, but it is possible. Then we've got the Nighthawk, right? Yep, Caldari, a little bit harder to buy really cheaply, 300 to 250, still 250 for the buyers. That's not bad. I think that's pretty much the range where I bought mine at as well. Just gonna be harder to trigger that one at the moment, although you can see in the last couple of days that those minimum prices have gone down as well. Then we get the Oniros. Yeah, pressure as well at the tail end here, but there's not that much to say. I think if you wanted one, you'll have one by now, 123 to 105, so you're buying these below 110 very easily. I think if you want to be ready, you will be ready at this point. And then again, we've got another one here, the Purifier, that went down to 15 million and is currently selling for almost 20 million. Then we got the Rook, that's currently going up, so low point 100 million for a Rook, now 170 for the sellers, 125 for the buyers. I'm not sure if that's some people that want to, because if I'm not mistaken, I talked about buying a Rook last week or the week before that, but I know I grabbed mine because my buy order is gone and I've got the Rook ship, so I bought it at a really good price, but you get a little bit of a bump on this one. Sort of unexpected. Then the Saber is down to a 1 year low point yet again, well below 40 for the sellers, 35 million for the buyers. Scalpel heading for 10 million. Yeah, no demand, 10 million. This again, if you're looking for a jumping point, right? You've just seen what those stealth bombers and some of these logistics cruiser frigates have done. Well, you're buying a Scalpel for 10 million. That is below the entire chart. It would make sense, buy one or two of them, be happy with a 10 million profit if it does materialize, but that's what I would look into at the moment. For active trading, that is. Scimitar heading back for the 1 year low point as well of 100 million for the buyers, yeah, 110 to 129. And then we get the Sleipnir, just not budging at all. So if you want a cheap Sleipnir, it is another command ship. You can buy that well below 250 at the moment, 248 to 222. And then we get the Vagabond, that's back on a 1 year low point yet again. And then finally the Zarmast going up slightly for Triglavian. That does seem to be the case at the moment. Still, buyers are coming in at 425 and 405, so maybe you can still buy a relatively cheap one, but of course they are Triglavian, so they are super expensive compared to everything else. But yeah, for Take 2 here, same pressure is mounting as what we're seeing in the advanced move materials. We do start to see that correlation work quite well. You got some exceptions, stealth bombers, Caldari ships, clearly those from time to time show some sell opportunities, and you may want to risk a couple of trades here and there. Again, I would not go all in, don't go too big in the volume so that you don't spook the market. And then my current tactic is I buy what I plan to use, and for this week, of course, as I mentioned, the Curse looks kind of juicy to grab a couple of them. It has that very cool passive that you can't spot it on the directional scanner. Next up, the Tick 3 ships, that's coming in at 52.20. There we go. Let's take a quick look at the destroyers first. As always, I don't expect too much to happen here. Again, the volumes are too low, and the cause of all of this is going to be because of all of the gas that's currently needed for faction warfare, faction ships. And as a result, all of these, while they're amazing ships in and of themselves, 55 million for a destroyer compared to a Tech 2 cruiser, it's just too much. So 55 to 51 million supply wise, half page, but it's like maybe 10 ships or so. It's actually probably going to slow down supply on slightly bad prices at the moment. Then we've got the Hecate that's very flat for the week, just below 60, where you would expect most of these to stay, 58 million to 56 million, and here you do have a full page of new supply that's coming in. But again, 60 million when you can buy like a logistics cruiser for 100 million, yeah, it just doesn't make sense. And then we've got the Jackdaw as well. That's seeing a little bit of pressure. Buyers are below 55, it seems. 57 to 54. Fresh supply. Yeah, maybe 20 ships. Well, it is a couple million more expensive than the Confessor as well. So that's sort of normal. But in general, you could say that unfortunately, these are too expensive to really move a lot of volumes or to command a lot of gas. Or anything like that in order to produce a lot of these, and so you'll probably have a very hard time getting a pronounced buy opportunity and getting a lot of volatility from big purchases, because at the moment, yeah, no one is going to buy a fleet of Jackdaws when they can buy a fleet of Tech 2 ships for crazy prices at the moment. Yeah, you can buy 5 to 6 Tech 2 frigates for the price of a Jackdaw. I think the calculation is easily made. And then we also still have the Zwiebel. That's still our laggard, right? It's still lagging behind everything, going down to well below 50 million, 48 million to 44 million on more supply. But the problems for the Zwiebel is, well, these are its volumes. What's the daily trade? Less than 20. So this one is just not even popular enough to ask for 50 million for one of these tactical shores. And so you're saying, yeah, maybe that's then a better cost proposition compared to like Take 2 ships at the moment, but it's just so much worse apparently in the meta that is just not the case. Where there is a little bit more potential, I would say, is the cruiser. So let's take a look at the Legion next. That looks juicy, right? You can also see a nice wavy chart. Sell above 190, buy below 180, which is where we're right now for the Legion. That looks a lot more interesting if you're really looking to actively trade. Legion currently selling for 182, no buyers, you're buying below 170. I would say, yep, buy opportunity for the Legion right now. And in the last couple of months, you had several sell opportunities above 190 and at 200 million even. So this is very, very nice. Close to 1 year low point for those buyers as well, but clearly well below 180. It's a possibility. And I think Tech 3 cruiser fleets is something that Nelsec will look into. Then we've got the Loki doing the same thing, crashing down quite substantially. All of a sudden, sellers at 184, buyers at 162. Very violent downturn as well to a 1 year low point. So buy well below 170 for a Loki. I would say yes, that is clearly another buy opportunity. Then we've got the Proteus that's holding on. So this one is not there yet. You can see pressure is mounting here as well, 193 to 182. But I would say that the Proteus needs those minimum price to be well below 180 before we would jump in. And then the Tengu, you could have seen that as well on the ticker, is also under pressure with buyers gone below 180, 182 to 170. So you are looking at cheap Tengus, Legions and Lokis at the moment. And in my opinion, you won't be the only ones to potentially spot this. Nelsec will look at this as well. And honestly, Legion fleets, Loki fleets, they are versatile enough and actually used, I think, as part of the meta as well. So there might just be a trade in Tech 3 cruisers, except for the Proteus at the moment. Same warning, I say it every single time, but in my opinion, it's very important, right? Don't go too crazy. If you're gonna buy 10 Tengus, you're gonna be stuck with 8 of them. You buy 1 or 2 of them, you make the trade, you're happy with the profit. That's how I would operate in this market, especially during the summer slump here. But that's right now, I would again say stealth bombers, logistics frigates, and then Tech 3 cruisers. That's where you can look at actively trading stuff at the moment in EVE Online. And then finally, we got the extra products for the week, which is going to be ice products, and that's coming in at 57.30-ish. Something like that. And yeah, it's just been a while, so let's take a look at these. You may have seen that as well, but on the ticker, the biggest increases have happened for fuel blocks over the last 2 weeks, up almost 20%. So let's see if that's because of this. materials, ice products, there we go. And let's start with the isotopes. So here are the helium isotopes. Nope, still flat below 500 for helium isotopes. Hydrogen isotopes, same story, flat at a very cheap price. Oxygen isotopes slightly up, but still well below 500. And is that all of them? Helium, hydrogen, nitrogen and oxygen. So isotopes are not the cause of increased fuel prices. This is still super cheap, very low. Not a great chart for people that are mining ice at the moment. We still got some other stuff. Here is heavy water, for instance. That's a little bit more respectable on the 1 year chart. Still only 130 for the sellers, 112 for the buyers. It's not that great, but it's very stable basically. Then we've got our liquid ozone, that's flat at 100, basically cheap as well. And finally we've got our strontium, that's going up a little bit, I think because of what's happening in nullsec. Posses and things like that still play a part, and I think it's fuel for something. 2850 to 2274. So the 1 year low point was down here at 1400 discs, sell for 28. That's not bad, that's 100% profit right there. If you've got some really cheap stront out there, you can sell at the moment, but that's probably not what's going to have caused the increase in fuel blocks. That might just be more nullsec rumblings or something like that, but it's not to be seen in the ice products at the moment. Yeah, maybe the PI stuff that's coming through there as well. So interesting. I would say no movement except for strons in the ice products, and despite that, over the last 2 weeks, nitrogen fuel blocks have gone up like above 15%, which is quite significant. But yeah, there we go guys, that will be this EVE Talk. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.